Nathaniel Blackwood stood in front of his expansive mirror, adjusting his tie with meticulous precision. The reflection staring back at him was that of a determined man, yet beneath the surface a whirlpool of anxiety churned. Clad in a tailored suit that screamed wealth, he felt like a fraud. Today was the day he would meet Emily Thompson's parents for the first time, and the weight of his secret pressed down on him like a heavy shroud. He was a billionaire, a tech mogul, whose innovations had transformed lives, yet here he was, preparing to present himself as a struggling artist. He took a deep breath, trying to quell the storm of doubt raging within. "What am I doing?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. It felt ludicrous, this charade he was about to engage in. The very thought of lying to Emily's family gnawed at his conscience. But then he recalled Emily's beaming smile, her laughter echoing in his mind. She had no idea of the life he led, the privileges he enjoyed. He didn't want her to see him through the lens of wealth. He wanted her to appreciate him for who he truly was, or rather who he pretended to be. "Just be yourself," he murmured, as if trying to convince not just himself, but the man in the mirror. Yet, he knew that the man he truly was would never be accepted by her father, Robert Thompson, a man who valued hard work, grit, and honesty above all else. Nathaniel's wealth was a stark contrast to the values Robert held dear. As he paced the room, his thoughts drifted to Emily. She was strong-willed, passionate, and fiercely independent, everything he admired. But today, as she prepared for their dinner, she was a bundle of nerves wrapped in excitement. Nathaniel could only imagine how she was feeling, unaware that the man she loved was about to walk into a web of deception. "Hey, babe, are you ready?" Emily's voice rang out through the apartment, a sweet melody that sliced through his anxious thoughts. "Almost," he called back, his voice tinged with feigned enthusiasm. He grabbed a worn-out jacket from the back of his chair and slipped it on. It was a deliberate choice, one that would help him embody the struggling artist he pretended to be. As he buttoned the jacket, Nathaniel rehearsed his backstory in front of the mirror. "I'm Nathan, just Nathan. I've been trying to make it as an artist in the city for a few years now," he practiced, his voice low and gravelly. "I paint to express my emotions, to connect with people." He paused, feeling the absurdity of the situation wash over him. "What a cliché," he scoffed. "Hey, are you okay?" Emily peeked her head into the room, her brow furrowing as she took in his reflection. "Yeah, just practicing my lines," he replied, forcing a smile. She stepped into the room, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders. "You're going to be amazing. My parents are going to love you," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Nathaniel fought back the guilt that threatened to overwhelm him. "I hope so," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "They're going to ask a lot of questions, right?" "Probably, but they'll see how much you care about me," she said, her confidence radiating like sunlight. "My dad can be a bit intimidating, but he just wants what's best for me. He'll appreciate your passion." "Passion," Nathaniel echoed, the word bittersweet on his tongue. He admired Emily's passion for art and her dreams of starting her own community program. But how could he ever truly connect with her family when he was built on a foundation of lies? "Okay, let's go. I'm ready to show you off," she exclaimed, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the door. As they stepped into the cool evening air, Nathaniel felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. The streets were alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation, but all he could hear was the pounding of his heart. "Just act natural," he reminded himself, though it felt like a monumental task. Emily chatted animatedly beside him, detailing the various art shows she'd attended recently and her hopes for the future. "I really think I can make a difference, Nathan. If only I could get a space for my program, I could help so many kids discover their creativity," she said, her passion evident in her voice. He nodded, genuinely impressed by her determination. "You'll do great things, Emily. I believe in you," he replied, his tone sincere. In that moment, he realized how much he admired her spirit, how much he wanted to support her dreams. But could he do that while keeping his own identity a secret? As they approached her family's home, a charming old structure with ivy creeping up the walls, Nathaniel felt his stomach twist. What if they see through me? He thought, panic rising within him. The door swung open before they could knock, revealing Robert Thompson, a sturdy man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a watchful gaze. "Emily, there you are," he boomed, pulling her into a warm embrace. "And you must be Nathan," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he appraised Nathaniel. "Yes, sir, just Nathan," Nathaniel replied, forcing a smile as he extended his hand. The grip was firm, a sign of a man used to hard work. Come in, dinner's almost ready," Robert said, leading them into the cozy living room adorned with family photos and art pieces that Emily had created over the years. The air was rich with the smell of roasted chicken and herbs, making Nathaniel's stomach growl. "Wow, it smells amazing in here," Emily exclaimed, her enthusiasm lighting up the room. "Linda's secret recipe," Robert replied with a proud smile. "You know she puts her heart into every meal." Nathaniel watched as Emily's mother, Linda, bustled around the kitchen, her laughter ringing out like music. She glanced over her shoulder, catching sight of Nathaniel. "And who is this handsome young man?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mom, this is Nathan. He's an artist," Emily said, her pride evident. "An artist, huh? Well, we can always use more creativity around here." Linda beamed, her warmth easing some of Nathaniel's tension. As they settled at the dining table, Nathaniel found himself surrounded by love and familiarity. Yet the gnawing feeling in his stomach refused to dissipate. He was a stranger among them, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and the weight of his deception loomed over him like a dark cloud. "Tell us about your art, Nathan," Robert said, his tone both curious and probing. Nathaniel opened his mouth to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. Well, I work mainly with acrylics, trying to capture emotions, you know," he stammered, glancing at Emily, whose encouraging smile bolstered his confidence. "That's wonderful. I always say art is a reflection of the soul," Linda chimed in, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Yes, exactly," Nathaniel replied, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe he could navigate this evening without revealing too much. As the dinner progressed, the conversation flowed, filled with laughter and stories. Yet Nathaniel's mind raced. With every question, every glance, he felt the pressure mount. The longer he played this role, the harder it would be to come clean. As they finished dessert, Robert leaned back, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "You know, Nathan, I've always believed that integrity and hard work are the cornerstones of success. It's what I taught Emily growing up." Nathaniel nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "I completely agree, sir. Hard work is essential," he managed to say, though the irony of the statement gnawed at him. He glanced at Emily, who was animatedly discussing her latest art project, her eyes sparkling with passion. In that moment, he realized how deeply he cared for her, yet how precariously he balanced on the edge of truth and deception. As the evening drew to a close, Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on a tightrope, one misstep away from tumbling into chaos. The warmth of Emily's family enveloped him, but it was a warmth built on a lie, and he could only hope that when the truth finally emerged, it wouldn't shatter the fragile world they had begun to build together. The table was elegantly set, adorned with fine china and glimmering silverware that caught the soft light of the chandelier overhead. The aroma of roasted chicken mingled with the scent of fresh herbs, filling the air with an inviting warmth. Nathaniel Blackwood, hidden beneath the guise of a struggling artist, sat at the dining table across from Robert Thompson, Emily's father. He could feel the weight of Robert's scrutiny as if the man were peering right through the layers of his carefully constructed facade. Emily, radiant and blissfully unaware of the tension in the room, smiled at Nathaniel, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Dad, isn't Nathaniel's work fascinating? He really captures the rawness of emotion in his art," she gushed, her enthusiasm making Nathaniel's heart swell. She was everything he had ever wanted, yet every word she spoke was a reminder of the deception that hung over his head. Robert, a man with a strong build and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "So, Nathaniel," he began, his voice a low rumble, "tell me more about your journey. How exactly does a struggling artist end up in this position?" Nathaniel swallowed hard, the question hanging in the air as he searched for the right words. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, but now, faced with Robert's penetrating gaze, he felt the ground beneath him shifting. "Well, it's been quite the journey," he replied, forcing a smile. "I've always found solace in painting. It's how I express my thoughts and feelings, you know? I started out selling my pieces at local fairs and gradually got more recognition." "Recognition, huh?" Robert's brow furrowed, skepticism evident in his tone. "And how long did it take you to get to that point? I assume there were challenges along the way." Nathaniel nodded, trying to project confidence despite the growing knot in his stomach. "Absolutely. I faced a lot of rejection initially. There were nights I didn't know how I would pay rent, let alone buy supplies, but I kept pushing through. I believe the struggle only makes the success sweeter." Robert's expression softened slightly, but Nathaniel could tell that the man was still unconvinced. "That's commendable," Robert said. "I admire anyone who works hard for their dreams. But tell me, Nathaniel, what do you think about the concept of integrity? It seems to be a lost art these days." Before Nathaniel could respond, Emily's mother, Linda, entered the room with a fresh platter of roasted vegetables. "Dinner is served," she announced cheerfully, oblivious to the tension that had built during the conversation. "I made your favorite, Robert." "Thank you, dear," Robert replied, his tone shifting as he turned his attention to the food. "This looks wonderful, Linda." As they began to eat, Nathaniel felt a momentary reprieve from the intense scrutiny. He took a bite of the chicken, savoring the flavors while stealing glances at Emily, who chatted animatedly about her latest art project. "I'm planning on showcasing some of my work at the community center next month," she said, her enthusiasm contagious. "I really want to inspire others to explore their creativity." "That sounds fantastic, sweetheart," Linda encouraged, her eyes twinkling with pride. "You have such a gift for bringing people together." Nathaniel felt a pang of admiration for Emily. Her passion was infectious, and it only deepened his desire to be honest with her. However, the weight of his secret loomed large in his mind. He forced himself to engage in the conversation, but the nagging feeling of impending doom lingered. As the dinner progressed, Nathaniel found himself increasingly on edge. Robert, who had been listening intently, suddenly leaned in, his expression serious. "You know, Nathaniel, success doesn't come without sacrifice. I've always believed that hard work and integrity are the cornerstones of a fulfilling life. My own journey wasn't easy, but I made sure to stay true to my values along the way." Nathaniel felt a chill run down his spine. Robert's tone was laced with a challenge, a reminder that his own life had been built on different principles. "I couldn't agree more, sir," Nathaniel replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I believe that every artist carries their own burdens, and it's those experiences that shape their work." "Burden indeed," Robert mused, his gaze unwavering. "But what happens when someone compromises their values for success? Can true art come from a place of dishonesty?" Before Nathaniel could respond, Linda interjected, "Let's not get too philosophical over dinner, Robert. Besides, I think everyone deserves a chance to find their path." She smiled warmly at Nathaniel, who appreciated her attempt to diffuse the tension. "Exactly," Nathaniel agreed, eager to shift the focus. "Art is subjective. What's important is the connection it creates with others." As the conversation continued, Nathaniel felt a sense of dread creeping back in. He could see Robert's steely gaze still fixed on him, and he knew that one slip could unravel everything. Just then, as Nathaniel instinctively reached for his water glass, his sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing the glint of his expensive wristwatch. Linda's eyes narrowed as she caught sight of it. "Nathaniel, is that a—" she began, her voice trailing off, confusion etched on her face. Realizing his mistake, Nathaniel's heart raced. "Oh, this?" he stammered, quickly adjusting his sleeve to hide the watch. "It's just an old piece I picked up at a thrift shop. You know how it is, trying to keep things simple." He laughed nervously, but the laughter fell flat in the tense atmosphere. Robert's expression shifted, his brow furrowing deeper. "A thrift shop, you say? Interesting choice for a struggling artist." His voice held an edge, one that sent a shiver down Nathaniel's spine. "Right. Well, you know how it goes," Nathaniel babbled, desperate to steer the conversation in a different direction. Sometimes you find the best treasures in unexpected places. Robert's eyes bore into his, weighing his words carefully. Indeed, but it's vital to remember where we come from and what we stand for. Authenticity is key. Emily, sensing the tension, placed her hand on Nathaniel's arm. Dad, let's not make him feel uncomfortable. Nathaniel's story is inspiring. It takes a lot of courage to follow your dreams. Robert nodded slowly, his gaze still unwavering. Courage and honesty, Emily. Those are the real measures of a man. The weight of Robert's words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating Nathaniel's ability to breathe freely. He could feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting with each passing second. As dinner continued, Nathaniel's mind raced. He had wanted to impress Robert, to win his approval, but now he found himself trapped in a web of his own making. With every bite he took, every word exchanged, the burden of his deception grew heavier, threatening to crush him beneath its weight. Emily's laughter rang out, a beautiful melody that should have brought him joy, but instead, it filled him with a sense of impending doom. He looked at her, this vibrant woman, who had unknowingly fallen in love with a lie, and felt a deep ache in his chest. The very foundation of their future together was built on shaky ground, and he was all too aware that one misstep could lead to a catastrophic collapse. As the evening wore on, Nathaniel realized he was running out of time. The truth loomed like a dark shadow, ready to pounce at the slightest moment of weakness. Would he be able to maintain the facade for much longer? Or would the weight of his lies finally come crashing down, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake? As Nathaniel sat in the quaint little cafe just down the street from Emily's family home, he could feel the weight of his disguise pressing down on him like a heavy cloak. The worn-out jacket he had chosen for the evening felt foreign on his shoulders, a constant reminder of the deception he was enacting. He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, the rich aroma wafting up to his nostrils, blending with the faint scent of freshly baked pastries. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the bustling street. Yet inside, his mind was anything but peaceful. "Are you all right?" A soft voice broke through his thoughts. It was Emily, her expressive hazel eyes filled with concern. She slid into the seat across from him, her cheeks slightly flushed from the chilly evening air. "You seem a bit distant." Nathaniel forced a smile, trying to mirror the joy he saw in her face. "Just thinking about tonight. I want to make a good impression on your parents." The lie slipped easily off his tongue, a practiced maneuver he had rehearsed more times than he could count. Emily clasped her hands together, a gesture that made her look even more endearing. "They're going to love you. I mean, how could they not? You're so talented." She leaned forward, her excitement radiating like the golden light around them. "I can't wait for you to show them your art. They'll see how passionate you are, and they'll understand why I fell for you." Nathaniel's heart sank a little deeper. The sincerity in her voice was intoxicating, yet it served as a stark reminder of his deception. "Thanks, Em. That means a lot." He took a sip of his coffee, the bitterness contrasting with the sweetness of her belief in him. "I just hope I can live up to their expectations." "Trust me, you will. And besides," she added, her tone turning playful, "if they don't like you, I'll just tell them they're wrong." She winked, and Nathaniel couldn't help but chuckle. They spent the next few minutes discussing the wedding plans, Emily's face lighting up with every detail she shared. "I want it to be intimate," she said, her voice softening. "Just our closest friends and family. I want it to feel real, you know, like a celebration of our love and not just a show." Nathaniel nodded, the vision of their wedding filling him with warmth, even as it tightened the knot of anxiety in his stomach. "That sounds perfect. I can't wait to see you in your dress." "Oh, Nathaniel!" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "You have no idea how much I've dreamed about this day, and to share it with you. It's everything I've ever wanted." His heart ached anew. How could he continue this charade when she was so honest and open? With every word, he felt the walls of his deception closing in around him, suffocating him slowly. He needed to tell her the truth, but feared losing her the moment he did. As they finished their coffees, Nathaniel sensed the familiar tightening in his chest. a premonition that tonight would be pivotal. Emily stood to leave, and he followed suit, his mind racing with thoughts of how to maintain his facade while navigating the dinner at her parents' house. Arriving at the Thompson residence, he marveled at its charm. The small two-story home exuded warmth, with flowers blooming in the garden and soft lights glowing from within. Emily took his hand, squeezing it reassuringly as they approached the door. "Just be yourself, Nathaniel. They'll love you for who you are." He nodded, though he knew that the who he was presenting tonight was a carefully crafted illusion. Emily knocked, and a moment later her mother, Linda, opened the door, her smile wide and welcoming. "Emily, darling," Linda exclaimed, pulling her daughter into a warm embrace. "And you must be Nathaniel. Come in, come in." Nathaniel stepped over the threshold, the inviting scent of home-cooked food enveloping him. He took a deep breath, trying to ground himself. This was it, the moment he had been both dreading and anticipating. "Dinner is almost ready," Linda said, leading them into the cozy living room where family photos adorned the walls, telling stories of memories and laughter. "Why don't you two sit down while I finish up?" As they settled onto the couch, Nathaniel's nerves danced like butterflies in his stomach. He exchanged glances with Emily, who smiled encouragingly. "Do you have any siblings?" he asked, trying to divert his thoughts from the impending scrutiny. Emily nodded, her expression turning thoughtful. "Just one, my brother Jake. He's away at college studying engineering. He's a bit of a genius if I do say so myself." "Sounds like a smart guy," Nathaniel replied, forcing the words out as his mind buzzed with the anxiety of the evening ahead. Before he could ponder further, Robert Thompson entered the room, his presence commanding yet warm. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, exuding an air of authority that came from years of hard work. His gaze fell on Nathaniel, and for a brief moment, Nathaniel felt like a fish under scrutiny. "Good evening, Nathaniel. It's nice to meet you," Robert said, extending his hand. The grip was firm, and Nathaniel could feel the weight of expectation in that handshake. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It's an honor to be here," Nathaniel replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Call me Robert," the older man said, a hint of a smile breaking through. "I'm looking forward to getting to know you better." As they settled into small talk, Nathaniel felt the tension begin to ease, if only slightly. Robert shared stories of his own journey, recounting how he had built his business from the ground up. The conversation flowed naturally, but Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling of being an imposter in a world where hard work and integrity were the currency of respect. "Emily tells me you're an artist," Robert said, his tone curious but probing. "What kind of art do you create?" Nathaniel felt the familiar tug of anxiety return. I focus mostly on abstract paintings," he replied, his voice shaky. "I find inspiration in the world around me, in emotions and experiences." "Interesting," Robert mused, his gaze unwavering. "Abstract, you say? That must be quite challenging. I respect anyone who can put their thoughts onto canvas." "Thank you," Nathaniel said, grateful for the momentary reprieve. He looked over at Emily, who was watching him with pride, and it fueled his resolve to keep his facade intact for just a little longer. Dinner was a delightful affair, with Linda's cooking stealing the show. They shared stories, laughter, and even a few light-hearted jabs at one another, creating a sense of camaraderie that Nathaniel desperately wanted to be part of. Yet, as the evening progressed, he could feel the weight of his secret pressing down on him, threatening to unravel everything he had built with Emily. Later, as they moved to the living room for dessert, Nathaniel found himself sitting closely beside Emily on the couch. The warmth of her presence provided some comfort, but the tension in his chest only tightened. "Are you okay?" Emily whispered, leaning in closer. "You've been quiet." "I'm fine. Just taking it all in," he replied, forcing a smile. "Your family is wonderful." "Thanks," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "I just hope they see how great you are." Nathaniel's heart ached at her faith in him. He wanted nothing more than to be the man she believed him to be, but with every passing moment, he felt more and more like a ghost haunting a life that wasn't his. As the night drew to a close, He knew he had to make a decision. The longer he waited, the heavier the truth would weigh on him. But with Emily nestled by his side and her family welcoming him with open arms, the thought of revealing his true identity felt like a betrayal. "Emily," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk for a moment?" "Of course, Nathaniel. What is it?" she replied, concern etched on her features. He glanced toward her parents, who were busy chatting about the latest family news. "Outside," he suggested, his heart pounding in his chest. As they stepped out onto the porch, the cool night air hit them, and Nathaniel took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he knew he had to do. But as he looked into Emily's eyes, filled with hope and love, he felt the weight of his decision grow heavier than ever. He started, but the words caught in his throat, a storm of emotions swirling within him. Would they survive this storm together, or would the truth tear them apart? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the city, Nathaniel Blackwood sat at his penthouse dining table, surrounded by a flurry of wedding preparations. The atmosphere was thick with excitement and tension, but for Nathaniel, the impending wedding felt like a noose tightening around his neck. He absently twirled a glass of fine red wine while his mind raced, consumed by thoughts of the truth he had buried beneath layers of deception. Tomorrow, he would marry Emily Thompson, the love of his life, yet the weight of his secret loomed larger than ever. He could feel the thrill of anticipation from her as she planned their wedding, but all he felt was guilt. The image of Emily, radiant and hopeful, danced in his mind, a stark contrast to the shadow of the lie he had woven. A sudden noise interrupted his reverie. It was Emily, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm as she entered the room. "Nathaniel, I just had the most amazing conversation with my dad. He's going to give a speech at the wedding about authenticity and integrity. Can you believe it?" Her eyes sparkled, and Nathaniel felt a pang of admiration mixed with guilt. Here she was, so proud of her father, and yet he was the very embodiment of the deception her father cherished. "Sounds great, Em," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your dad's always been a man of principles. He's so passionate about community work and helping others. It inspires me," she said, her voice softening as she gazed out of the window. "I've been thinking about starting a community art program, to give back and help young artists find their voice. I want to create a space where they can express themselves freely." Nathaniel's heart swelled at her words. The way her face lit up when she spoke about her dreams was mesmerizing. He admired her unwavering commitment to her values, her desire to make a difference in the world. But as he listened, the weight of his own deception pressed heavily on his conscience. How could he ever tell her the truth? How could he shatter her dreams with the revelation of his own? "Em, that sounds incredible," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You'd be a great mentor for so many young artists. Your passion is something special." Emily turned to him, her expression earnest. "Do you really think so? Sometimes I worry that I won't be able to make a real impact. My dad always says that integrity and hard work matter the most. I just want to live up to that." Nathaniel swallowed hard, feeling the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. He wanted to reach out, to assure her that she could achieve anything she set her mind to, but the irony of his situation stung like a slap in the face. "You will, Em. You have the heart for it," he managed to say, forcing enthusiasm into his tone. That night, Nathaniel tossed and turned in bed, haunted by the conversation. The words authenticity and integrity echoed in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. He could envision Robert Thompson standing at the altar, speaking passionately about the importance of being true to oneself, and Nathaniel felt the creeping dread of exposure. He had built a life on the foundations of innovation and technology, but here he was, masquerading as an artist, a mere shadow in the light of his fiancée's dreams. As the hours crept by, he found himself unable to sleep. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing minute, and finally, he decided he needed to talk to someone who could help him navigate this storm. He picked up his phone and dialed his best friend Lucas, who answered after a few rings, his voice groggy. "Dude, it's the middle of the night. What's going on?" Lucas sounded half asleep but concerned. I just need to talk," Nathaniel replied, pacing the floor of his penthouse. I'm freaking out, Lucas. Tomorrow's the wedding, and I don't know what to do. Is this about the whole struggling artist charade you're pulling? Lucas asked, his tone shifting to serious. You know you can't keep this up forever, right? What happens when she finds out? Nathaniel stopped in his tracks, the question hitting him like a freight train. He had been so caught up in maintaining his facade that he hadn't considered the aftermath of his actions. I love her, man. I just wanted to meet her family on their level, to show them that I understand the value of hard work. Lucas sighed, his voice steady. But you're not being honest, Nate. You're building a relationship on a lie. You need to come clean before it's too late. You're risking everything. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling inside him. What if I lose her? What if she can't accept me for who I really am? Then she's not the one for you, Lucas replied firmly. You deserve someone who loves you for you, not some version of yourself you've created. It's not too late, but you need to make a choice. Tomorrow, you have to decide if you're going to keep hiding or if you're going to step into the light. As the call ended, Nathaniel sank onto the couch, his heart racing. Lucas's words resonated deeply within him. He had built walls to protect himself, but in doing so, he had also trapped himself in a web of deceit. The thought of standing before Emily, knowing that he was hiding the truth, felt unbearable. In the early hours of the morning, Nathaniel made a decision. He would confront his fears and tell Emily everything. He had to be honest, not only for her, but for himself. As he lay back down, exhaustion washed over him, but a flicker of hope sparked within. He wanted to be the man she believed him to be, and that could only happen if he stripped away the layers of falsehood. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the air filled with excitement and anticipation. As Nathaniel donned his tailored suit, he felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. He imagined Emily in her wedding dress, glowing with happiness, and he wanted nothing more than to embrace that moment fully. He was determined to make it right. But as he arrived at the venue, the atmosphere shifted. He spotted Robert talking with guests, his demeanor serious yet welcoming. Nathaniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he approached. The sight of Emily in her dress, radiant and beautiful, made his heart race, but the looming presence of Robert felt like a storm cloud overhead. "Hey, you look incredible," Nathaniel said as he walked up to Emily, who smiled brightly, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you. I can't believe this day is finally here." She twirled playfully, the fabric of her dress swirling around her. As they stood together, Nathaniel's resolve began to waver. The weight of his secret pressed down harder, and he could feel Robert's gaze on him like a hawk watching its prey. The moment of truth was approaching, and he had to prepare himself for what lay ahead. Can we talk for a minute?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Her brow furrowed with concern, and for a moment Nathaniel hesitated. What if he ruined everything? But as he looked into her eyes, filled with love and trust, he knew he had to take the leap. It was time to reveal the man behind the mask. As dawn broke over the quaint town, the sunlight filtered through the delicate lace curtains of the Thompson household. Nathaniel Blackwood stood in the small guest room he had occupied for what felt like an eternity, his heart beating in a rhythm that echoed the weight of his deception. Today was the day he would marry Emily Thompson, the woman who had captivated his heart and soul, yet the burden of his secret loomed larger than ever. He glanced at himself in the mirror, the reflection of a man dressed not in a tailored suit, but in a simple white shirt and black slacks borrowed from the wardrobe of a much less fortunate soul. The faux persona he had crafted, a struggling artist with dreams as vibrant as the colors on a canvas, felt like a mask that was becoming increasingly burdensome. Nathaniel ran a hand through his tousled hair, a nervous habit that had accompanied him since childhood. He could still hear Emily's laughter from the kitchen, her voice lilting through the air as she prepared for the day. It was infectious, a melody that chased away the shadows of his thoughts, if only for a moment. "Nat, are you almost ready?" Emily called from the hallway, her tone a mix of excitement and impatience. "Just a minute," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The truth was, he was terrified, not just of the ceremony ahead, but of the potential fallout from his lies. As the man he had pretended to be, he had grown to love Emily deeply. But Nathaniel Blackwood, the billionaire tech mogul, was a man who had built a fortress of wealth and success, and that fortress now stood between him and the woman who believed in the sincerity of their love. As he stepped into the hallway, the sight of Emily took his breath away. She stood there, radiant in a delicate lace wedding dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. Her smile could light up the darkest corners of his soul, and for a brief moment, the heaviness in his heart lifted. "You look amazing," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "Thanks. I can't believe this day is finally here." Emily twirled playfully, her excitement palpable. "We're about to make the best promise ever." Nathaniel swallowed hard, forcing down the knot in his throat. "Yeah, the best promise," he echoed, though the weight of his secret gnawed at him with every passing second. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the living room where their families had gathered. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and chatter, but Nathaniel felt like an intruder in his own life. Robert Thompson, Emily's father, stood at the center of it all, his presence commanding respect. Nathaniel had always admired the man's integrity and work ethic from afar, but now the thought of facing him made his stomach churn. "Are you ready?" Emily asked, her voice a soft melody, cutting through his spiraling thoughts. "Ready as I'll ever be," Nathaniel replied, though the words felt hollow. As the ceremony began, Nathaniel found himself standing at the altar, his heart racing as he watched Emily walk down the aisle. She was a vision of beauty and grace, and the sight of her nearly made him forget the deception that hung over him like a storm cloud. He took a deep breath, trying to ground himself in the moment, but even as he gazed into her bright eyes, he could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the officiant asked, and Robert stepped forward, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I do," Robert replied, his voice strong but laced with an undertone that Nathaniel could not quite decipher. As they exchanged vows, Nathaniel struggled to focus. His mind raced with thoughts of his true identity, the life he had built, and the love he had found in Emily. Each word that left his lips felt like an echo of the life he had forged, yet it was a life woven with lies. He could almost hear the ticking clock of inevitability, counting down to the moment when the truth would finally emerge. "Do you, Nathaniel, take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?" The officiant's voice broke through his reverie. "I do," he managed to say, but the words felt like poison on his tongue. Then came the moment of the rings. As he reached for the small box, his fingers trembled, and he could feel Robert's gaze piercing through him, as if the older man could see right through the facade into the heart of Nathaniel's deception. The weight of that stare sent a chill down his spine, and doubt began to creep in. Was Robert aware of his secret? Had he seen through the charade that Nathaniel had worked so hard to maintain? As Emily placed the ring on his finger, Nathaniel's heart raced. The moment felt surreal, the world around him fading into a blur. All he could focus on was Emily's face, glowing with love and trust. "I promise to love you, support you, and cherish you," she said, her voice steady and full of conviction. "I promise," he echoed, but the words felt like a betrayal. With each passing second, the truth clawed at his insides, demanding to be freed. Just as he was about to recite his final vows, his eye caught Robert's once more. The older man's expression had shifted, a knowing look that sent a wave of panic through Nathaniel. It was as if Robert was silently challenging him, asking if he would dare to unveil the truth that lay buried beneath layers of deceit. "Do you, Emily, take Nathaniel to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the officiant asked, and Nathaniel could barely hear her affirmative response over the tumult of emotions swirling within him. As the officiant moved to the final part of the ceremony, Nathaniel's heart pounded louder than ever. The moment of truth loomed before him, and he felt as though he were standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to plunge into the unknown. Would he be courageous enough to admit the truth? Or would he allow the weight of his secret to crush the love they had built together? He opened his mouth to speak, the words forming on his tongue, but just then, he caught another glimpse of Robert. The older man's eyes held a depth of understanding, a hint of sorrow mixed with resolve, and Nathaniel knew that whatever happened next would change everything. And in that instant, the world around him faded as he stood at the precipice of his own truth, teetering between the love he felt for Emily and the facade he had created. The choice was his, but the consequences loomed larger than he could ever have imagined. Nathaniel Blackwood stood at the altar, his heart racing as he looked into Emily Thompson's eyes, which sparkled with joy and love. The church was filled with friends and family, the scent of blossoming flowers mingling with the faint aroma of polished wood. Yet despite the beauty surrounding him, a storm brewed inside Nathaniel. The weight of his deception pressed heavily on his chest, and for a moment, he felt paralyzed by the enormity of what he was about to do. As the officiant began to speak, Nathaniel's mind raced through the myriad of thoughts that had consumed him for days. This was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives, a celebration of love and commitment. But how could he stand there, pretending to be someone he wasn't? The moment stretched infinitely, each second amplifying the tension in the air. He could feel the eyes of their gathered loved ones on him, particularly Robert, Emily's father, who sat in the front row, his expression unreadable. Nathaniel took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage he had left. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, to finally confess the truth he had buried so deep, Robert suddenly stood up. The room fell into a hushed silence, all eyes shifting to him. The officiant paused, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Before this man speaks," Robert's voice rang out, steady and authoritative, "I need to address something important." There was a sharp intake of breath from Emily, and Nathaniel's heart sank. Robert stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Nathaniel, piercing through the facade. "I've known who you are from the very beginning, Nathaniel." The room remained silent, tension thickening the air. Gasps echoed from a few guests who were caught off guard, while whispers began to circulate, like a gentle breeze stirring the leaves. "You, with your designer watch and your perfect suit," Robert continued, his voice unwavering. "You thought you could fool me? That I wouldn't recognize what was right in front of me?" Nathaniel felt a rush of heat flood his cheeks. He thought he had been so careful, so clever in his disguise. He opened his mouth, but words escaped him. What could he possibly say? "Mr. Thompson, Let me finish," Robert interrupted, raising a hand. "You might have wealth beyond measure, but that doesn't impress me. What impresses me is character, integrity, and the ability to stand on your own merits. You want my blessing to marry my daughter? Then you need to prove you can be more than just a name in a bank account." Emily's expression shifted from shock to confusion, her brows knitting together. "Dad, what are you talking about? Nathaniel is a billionaire who decided to masquerade as a struggling artist," Robert interjected, his tone firm yet not unkind. "And that is fundamentally problematic. I need to know that you love my daughter for who she is, not what she represents to your status." The silence was deafening. Nathaniel felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. He stole a glance at Emily, whose eyes were wide with disbelief, and he could see the hurt beginning to bloom there. "Emily, Nathaniel tried, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was going to tell you. I was just trying to what?" Emily's voice cracked, and Nathaniel felt like he had been punched in the gut. "To protect me from the truth? To hide behind a lie? Nathaniel, I thought you were different." He took a step toward her, but Robert's presence loomed large, a protective barrier between them. "You wanted to keep your wealth a secret because you thought I would judge you," Robert said, his gaze unwavering. "But here's the thing. It's not about the money. It's about sincerity. It's about knowing the person beside you truly accepts who you are, flaws and all." Nathaniel's heart raced as he processed Robert's words. He realized that this was not merely about his deceptions. It was about Emily's trust, her belief in him. "Mr. Thompson, I understand why you're upset," he began, his voice steadier now. "But I love Emily. I came into this with the best intentions. I wanted to show her that I could be someone she could be proud of, someone who understands her values. But I see now that I've only created a rift between us." Robert crossed his arms. His expression softened slightly, but his eyes still held a challenge. "So prove it, Nathaniel. Show me you can step away from your world of privilege and demonstrate you're capable of hard work, humility, and genuine love for my daughter." Nathaniel felt a swell of determination rise within him. He had never faced a challenge like this before, but he knew it was time to shed the layers of deception. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, the words tumbling out with unexpected conviction. "Spend a week in my shoes," Robert replied, his voice calm but resolute. "Work alongside me at the construction site where I started. Experience what it means to earn every dime, to sweat for your goals. Only then will I consider giving you my blessing." Emily's eyes darted between her father and Nathaniel, a mixture of hope and uncertainty flickering across her face. "Dad, is that really necessary?" Robert held up a hand, silencing her. "It's not just about Nathaniel, Emily. It's about understanding the foundation of our family. If he can do this, if he can prove to me that he's more than just a wealthy man, then I will know he truly loves you." Nathaniel felt a knot of fear twist in his stomach, but beneath it lay a strange sense of relief. This was a chance to redeem himself, to show Emily that he was willing to fight for her, to change for her. "I accept," he said, meeting Robert's gaze head-on. "I'll do it. I'll prove to you that I can be more than just Nathaniel Blackwood, the millionaire." Robert nodded, a flicker of respect passing between them. He turned to Emily, who looked torn, her heart caught between the two most important men in her life. "You need to decide if you can trust him, Emily. This is your future at stake." Nathaniel stepped forward, taking Emily's hands in his. "I know I've broken your trust, and for that I'm deeply sorry, but I will do everything I can to earn it back. I love you, Emily, and I will show your father that I'm worthy of you no matter what it takes." Tears glistened in Emily's eyes as she searched his face, searching for the truth buried beneath the layers of deception. "Nathaniel, just give me a chance," he implored, his voice raw with emotion. "Let me prove it to you." The church, once filled with joy and celebration, now buzzed with an electric tension. The air was thick with uncertainty, but as Nathaniel stood there, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just a wedding. It was about love, authenticity, and the courage to face the truth. As Emily finally nodded, her expression softening, Nathaniel knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test them all in ways they could never have imagined.